proper basicality. It doesn't have any epistemic warrant, and it doesn't have any epistemic justification. We could talk about that in a second. But I was going to bring up where the sources for how one acquires knowledge or justified belief. Obviously, in our last debate that we had, you spoke about perception, memory, consciousness, and reason as one acquires knowledge. So these are the senses that how we gain knowledge. So these 5 senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch is how we get this primary information regarding an object or individual or events and so forth. So if you're saying I have to rely on my senses to read that text of the Bible, or I have to rely on my memory to rely on the Bible or rely on the text, that is an error in classical foundationalism that rely only on your senses. See, I'm a Reformed foundationalist, which is that God is non-inferential, axiomatic, and I don't need inferential processing or judgment or argument for the conclusion that's God. So I just know it. I don't go through any inference or empirical or inferential process, and then I infer that's God. I don't do that. It's direct. It's clear. I just know through what is called sensus divinitatis. So back to the Great Pumpkin objection. See, this is what the atheists will do over and over. They'll say that the atheists will say, well, how come it's not the same as believing in God as people who believe in voodoo cult blood magic? Or the atheists will say, I don't believe in God because of people who practice voodoo cult blood magic, and I think it's the same as your God. So that's the problem here, Socka. Voodoo cult blood magic, the Great Pumpkin, the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, Iron Man, and Thanos are not properly basic. This is just really bad epistemic judgment and bad epistemic quality. It has no epistemic justification. It has no epistemic warrant, and it's an epistemic mistake. It does not meet the requirement of a criterion for what is rational, reasonable, direct, and obvious and immediate. It does not meet the requirement for proper basicality. So this is a problem when you say, why not voodoo cult blood magic, the Great Pumpkin, Flying Spaghetti Monster, Spider-Man? This does not fit the requirement for proper basicality, which is the differentiation of what is properly basic and what is not. So this does not fit a criterion, a principle, a rule, or a standard for what is properly basic. It doesn't fit the rule for rationality, and it's just very bad epistemic judgment. It's bad epistemic warrant. It doesn't have any epistemic justification, and this is what Plantinga says when you can point out things that are stupid and meaningless and illogical. When we don't have to, we can use epistemic judgment on what is not properly basic and what is properly basic. So that's why I said I think your coherence and set of beliefs for reality are based on another set of beliefs that could be based on Spider-Man, and those set of beliefs on Spider-Man are based on Thor. Since you're a coherentist and those set of beliefs are based on other set of beliefs, kind of like a spider web of beliefs, I think your coherence on this for the Great Pumpkin is based on a set of beliefs that are based on Thor for reality. And you would have no way to explain those set of beliefs, since you have to abandon certain beliefs as a coherentist and add certain beliefs as a coherentist, and even subtract certain beliefs as a coherentist. So you have no, basically I'm accusing Socka of being a weak foundationalist, because he has to have some sort of a foundation for coherence, because he has to abandon, he has to attach another set of beliefs that cohere to another set of beliefs that have no epistemic warrant. It's possible that the things that he coheres to reality could be false, since he has no foundational view. Now, like I said, how do I know it's the God of Christianity and not the Great Pumpkin? Because of something we cannot deny. God is he's non-inferential, so we can make epistemic judgments, we can make epistemic knowledge. We have epistemic knowledge. We understand proper basicality to fit a criterion for rationality. We look, we study, we find properly basic beliefs, and we find epistemic warrant. Now, why not voodoo cult blood magic and the witch doctor, like you were saying, and you can attach any rational religious belief, that's what you were saying before, which is a bad epistemic mistake. It's bad epistemic quality. You cannot attach Thor to the same as God. God is non-inferential, he's axiomatic, he's foundational, he's immediate. So that's how I view God. So when you say, how come I can't view God as the Great Pumpkin, that is an error in classical foundationalism, which means that you have to read the text through your senses. I'm not a classical foundationalist. I'm a foundationalist, which means non-inferential. So I would say that whatever thing you're going to say now is an error on classical foundationalism. And you're going to say, well, why not believe in voodoo cult blood magic as the same as your God? Well, those are not properly basic beliefs. They do not fit the criterion for proper basicality. So that's what I'm saying. So the atheist will continue to say, because, well, I think it's the same as your God, as the flying spaghetti monster, or Spider-Man, or Batman, or Wolverine, or Iron Man, or even Thanos. Those are not properly basic. It's really bad epistemic judgment, bad epistemic quality, has no epistemic justification or epistemic warrant. It's clearly an epistemic mistake. It doesn't meet the requirement of what is rational, reasonable, direct, obvious, and immediate, and that what is non-inferential is a foundation for the belief in God. It doesn't meet the requirement for proper basicality, which is something that distinguishes from something that's properly basic and what is not. Spider-Man, the Great Pumpkin, is not properly basic. It doesn't meet a requirement for a criterion, which is a principle, standard, or rule for proper basicality, which is something that is reasonable, logical, and meaningful. Like if I said leaves fall because of pink unicorns, and the atheist is going to argue that's the same reasoning as believing in God, that would not be properly basic. It would be irrational to think that leaves fall because of pink unicorns. This would be bad epistemic judgment. So this would be not a rational reason to believe that leaves fall because of pink unicorns. God is axiomatic, which is self-evident. He's direct, obvious, and immediate. He's non-inferential. So the belief in God is rational, reasonable, direct, and obvious when it comes to axiomatic beliefs. What do you have to say, sir?
Well, I mean, considering the fact that you just plagiarized a shitload of Plantinga, I'm really curious to how much of that you actually understood.
No,
okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so here's one of the issues that you come here. So you started dropping terms like epistemic warrant and property basicality. Okay, now the question that I have for you, even when it comes to something referring to something as a non-inferential belief, is that it's great to throw these words out there, and then it's great to assert that any counterexample given, such as the Great Pumpkin or voodoo magic, does not meet the same qualifications that you put in your God. Yet you have not demonstrated why they wouldn't. The point of a non-inferential. I'm sorry.
I just told you.
Shush.
No, really? Okay, go ahead.
You merely asserted as fact, saying that the belief in God has a certain amount of epistemic warrant, that these other claims don't have the same properly basicality that the belief in God has. Okay, but yet you don't define what are these characteristics that God has that somehow manages to magically transcend and have these characteristics to begin with, or for that matter, what any properly basic belief, what type of qualities would be required for it. So, for example, the belief in God as a non-inferential belief, does that require justification of some sort? Because I assume that it does, because you said that they have some type of epistemic warrant. So when you say that you have a belief in God that is properly basic, non-inferential, but yet justified, is it justified as some type of infallible belief, or is it justified because it has some type of infallible justification?
I'm saying that the existence of God and how I view God is non-inferential, just like your senses.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. But I'm asking you a clear question. Okay, you said that it's a non-inferential belief with epistemic warrant. The epistemic warrant that it has, is it non-inferential because it has some justification as an infallible belief? Or is it justification in the fact that it has an infallible justification? So let me explain for something like this, is that there could be something that is true, because to assume that is true necessitates that another aspect of something is true. Okay, so that in order to assume that we have our the capability to understand the world, that it necessarily requires the existence of some type of omniscient being that is the tools of our rationality or the foundations of logic or whatever for us to understand it. That some type of claim like that would require much more of an argument than what you simply put forward here by merely asserting it. But if you want to say that it has some type of infallible justification, in the sense that the application of such a belief would require, therefore, the assumption of that belief in order to even try to negate it, well, that's something different. So, for example, I present to you like the conversations that we've had before, where we talked about things that foundationalists take as properly basic beliefs, such as the reliability of our memory, has to be assumed. You couldn't justify it outside of using the memory itself. If you say that my memory is reliable because I remember that my memory is reliable, that doesn't work. In fact, most properly basic beliefs, in fact, all properly basic beliefs, require the only justification to come from simply asserting it itself. But that right there just leads you to the state of things like, tautologies or circular arguments when it comes to trying to justify these beliefs. So there is this type of like non-inferential belief where you can have some type of justification, through some type of like infallible justification. So if I want to remember, if I want to say that my memory is reliable, I can say that. And now the justification isn't necessarily that I can remember every single time that my memory was reliable. But for me to argue against that fact, I would first have to, obviously assume the reliability of my memory. But sorry, so to argue against that fact, I would also have to assume the reliability of my memory. So if I want to assume that my memory is reliable, I have to, first off, assume that my memory and all the memories I have my memory reliable are reliable. If I want to argue against my memory being reliable, I still have to assume that my memory is reliable. So you have to actually assume the inverse of the position just to argue against it. And this goes for pretty much almost every single properly basic belief out there. That's why we could say that these things have some type of epistemic warrant in the fact that they have this kind of infallible justification of it. Now, that is what I put forward as an example of what can qualify something as a properly basic belief on a foundationalist model. What you have not done is to explain to me why it is the case that me assuming God doesn't exist is somehow contradictory to anything. Why I don't have to assume that God exists to say that God doesn't exist. Now, this goes completely against how we would define any properly basic belief out there through infallible justification. So, again, when you say that your belief in God has some type of, epistemic warrant, I'm assuming you're talking about that it's either an infallible belief or has some type of infallible justification. But you have not produced anything that would lead me to believe that either of those are the case for God. You just simply asserted it.
Are you done? All right. So you said the reliance of the memory in the senses to read the biblical text, or the reliance of the memory of to rely on certain things that respond to my memory, like perception and things. But that's an error in classical foundationalism that rely only on your senses. I'm a reformed foundationalist, which is that God is non-inferential. It's axiomatic. I don't have to supply you with some sort of inferential processing or judgment. I don't need an inferential processing or judgment or an argument for the conclusion that it's God. I just know it. It's just like looking at a tree. You don't question the existence of your sensory.
But that's not epistemic warrant, Skyout. I'm sorry. I provided you with the examples of how you would provide epistemic warrant for a properly basic belief.
I know how.
I gave you two examples through infallible belief or infallible justification. For a non-inferential properly basic belief, I explained to you why it is the case that we can look at these other properly basic beliefs and put them in the category of properly basic. What you have done is you have again asserted that God is some type of properly basic belief, but have yet to explain how it falls into the same category.
I'll tell you.
And you have not provided anything that comes close to epistemic warrant to justify why that belief is any different than believing in voodoo or the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah, you're going to bring up the voodoo, cold blood magic thing as if they're the same as my God. But I told you, when I say that God is properly basic, I'm talking about proper basicality, what fits the criterion for proper basic beliefs. So you're saying voodoo, cold blood magic is the same as my God. That's not properly basic. It doesn't meet the criterion for proper basicality. What is proper basicality?
Well, so far at this point in time, neither does your God. That's why I use them as an example. Remember, I use those as an example because they are equally as justified as what you have provided so far for God.
No, it does not fit the proper basicality. What is rational? Voodoo, cold blood.
So far, like I said, so far, neither has your God.
Well, that's an error on your part in epistemic knowledge.
You're saying it's not an error on my part. If you can't explain why it is the case that your God has some type of infallible justification, like any other non-inferential, properly basic belief out there, well, the error is not on mine; it's on you.
So you're basically saying that belief in God is the same as Spider-Man, Thor, and Spaghetti Monster, and voodoo, cold blood magic. That's what you're saying, really, dude? Really, that's bad.
I'm saying that when it comes to epistemic warrant, you have provided exactly the same amount of support
You
that anybody would
study
put those
them.
arguments.
You study what's actually that goes with proper basicality and criterion for rationality and justification, what is logical and reasonable. A voodoo cult blood. Yeah, voodoo cult blood.
I'm sorry. You study them? Are you saying that they're no longer non? Are you saying that they're not that they're no longer non-inferential? Because I can tell you right now, the other thing about non-inferential beliefs is I don't need to be told what they are.
Okay, but you're equivocating between voodoo cult blood magic, the Great Pumpkin, flying spaghetti monster as the same. So that doesn't even fit the criterion for rationality at all. We can make epistemic
only the same in the fact that you provided exactly the same amount of epistemic warrant that I would to take those ideas seriously as well.
Again, you're not fitting the criterion or standard or rule of principle for proper basicality or for proper.
I'm sorry, but up to this point in time of the conversation, I'm the only person that's laid forward the qualities of proper basicality or what it means for something to be a properly basic belief.
No, and I would say that your coherence instead of beliefs of reality is based on something.
This has nothing to do with coherence. This has nothing to do with coherence.
It's an error.
What this is, no, because we're talking about properly basic beliefs. Okay, this is what we're doing. Is we're doing an internal critique of your view right now, assuming that foundationalism is true. Coherence theory of knowledge has not come into play here at all.
That's how you view the Great Pumpkin. Your coherency, whatever set of beliefs you have.
This is
what are your set of beliefs?
That's wrong. That's wrong. This is internal critique where I'm assuming the model of foundationalist. This has nothing to do with coherentism.
Bad.
You haven't proven that yet. I'm sorry. Like, at this point in time, like this is why I said this is a waste of time. Is that I've laid out quite clearly what I expect from you.
You lost. That's why it's a waste of time because you know God.
So did I? Oh, well, just because I know. Okay, so now you've gone to the part of the argument where you have to assert what it is that I know about reality in order to win the argument.
That's
so if I just say that Skyout, you know that you're a fucking idiot and you don't know what the hell you're talking about, then that would just be just as equally a win for me.
No, that would be a logical.
Only difference is I have epistemic warrant to believe it.
That would be illogical and meaningless. Because
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm failing at something, so I don't mean to interject. Skyout, can you do me a favor? And then Socka, you do the same when Skyout is done. Can you summarize Sokka's point?
Oh, he's just saying I don't have rationality or as the same as a belief in God, that God is not properly basic as voodoo cult blood magic. He doesn't fit the requirements of rationality, that it's the same as believing in Thor, Spider-Man. Which I'm saying is that you need epistemic warrant, you need epistemic judgment, and we can use our epistemic knowledge to fit the criterion for proper basicality. And he's saying that no, it's the same as your God, as voodoo cult blood magic. Well, we can study them, we can look at them to see if they're properly basic, and they're not. Spider-Man is not properly basic, and for him to say it's the same as Spider-Man is illogical, meaningless, and retarded. It's trash can worldview. Coherentism is a trash can worldview. He has
Socka, can you summarize his point?
His point is that he wants to assert that the belief in God is properly basic because of his Reformed theology. Okay, when he uses a position of Reformed epistemology, he's using God as the foundation that justifies all other beliefs from that. And he's saying that God is equal to the same type of properly basic belief that any foundations would use to describe things such as their memory, the foundation of logic, or anything like that. But what he also has done is he's asserted that God provides some type of epistemic warrant that would somehow elevate it above the Great Pumpkin or belief in voodoo magic or any other type of concept that we can come up with. But what he has not done up to this point in time is actually explain what it means for something to have epistemic warrant. Now, remember, I've actually laid out for non-inferential beliefs what are considered justification for those things that are non-inferential. He has not. So if we just want to go by this, like, here's the simple truth of this, okay, is that when we're talking about a non-inferential belief, we're talking about a belief that is not being influenced by any other belief. Okay, it stands on its own, and it stands as a foundation on which all other beliefs will generally form from. They're non-inferential. They don't infer anything from anything else. Okay, they don't rely on your senses. They don't rely on logic. They don't rely on anything at all. They just exist.
Right, and you don't need
what makes those what. Okay, so right there. Okay, he just I just want to point out that he said we don't require justification for those. Now, we're just going to come back to that in a second, because non-inferential beliefs can have justification. And I gave the two categories in which we accept justification for inferential beliefs: infallible belief, infallible justification. Those are two ways in which we can come to a non-inferential belief about something.
Really,
Now,
dude?
what he's saying right here is that he's saying that they don't require justification, but that is directly contradictory to his previous statement that they had epistemic warrant. Now, they either have justification and epistemic warrant, or they do not. But he can't even keep his own thing together anymore, that he has now contradicted himself.
Let me explain the epistemic warrant. I'm saying God is properly basic, and we have epistemic warrant that he's non-inferential, and the belief in God and belief in Jesus Christ is properly basic. Why is it properly basic? We can study them, we can look at them, we can make epistemic judgments and use our epistemic knowledge and actually look at properly basic
Which makes it an inferential belief. You've just now taken your non-inferential belief, which is supposed to be the foundation of your entire system of epistemology here, and you've just turned it into from a non-inferential belief into an inferential one, because it requires previous belief. It requires previous knowledge of other things before you can even get to the point to study what it is that your properly basic belief is.
No, I'm saying I have a set of beliefs that cohere to reality, that cohere to properly basic beliefs off the foundation. They're building blocks off the properly basic beliefs. I have a set of other beliefs that cohere to reality that cohere to the other properly basic beliefs, similar to like a house and a building. So you have like a basketball, and the basketball.
We're not talking about coherentism right now. We're talking about your view as a foundationalist. And what you just said there is that you have a set of properly basic beliefs that you're building off of. Those properly basic beliefs, I'm pretty sure I can tell you what they are, because they're the same properly basic beliefs that most foundationalists have to posit before they make any claims of knowledge about reality. The reliability of your memory, reliability of your senses, the existence of an external, the external world outside your mind. These are the type of properly basic beliefs we'll have. Now, does your worldview? Does your worldview?
That is bad.
Is that bad epistemic judgment? So tell me, what properly basic beliefs is it that Skyout holds?
Dude, that God is properly basic.
So the properly basic belief that you hold is that God is properly basic.
He's self-evident. He's axiomatic. He's foundational. So that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And you keep missing.
Do you think that those things are the only things that make something a belief properly basic?
Dude, I didn't try.
Because I'm sorry. If you're talking about just if you're talking about internal consistency within something, the Great Pumpkin's internally consistent too. I could just simply assert. Absolutely. And do you know why? Because I could say that the Great Pumpkin is self-evident. I could say that the Great Pumpkin is axiomatic. I can say all of these things about it. Because tell me why I can't.
Because
tell me what other thing that I need to posit.
Dude, are you literally going to sit there and say that the Great Pumpkin is the same as believing God is properly basic? It doesn't even fit.
So now you're just special pleading. Now you're just special pleading by thinking that their God is the only one that fills those categories. Tell me, Skyout, this is a really simple task for you. God is a non-inferential belief in your mind. God also has epistemic warrant. Okay, so now God is a non-inferential belief. Can you remain consistent?
No. You're making an error.
Is God a non-inferential belief?
I've been saying that, bro, but you keep making the error of classical foundationalism, saying I have to rely on my memory to read a text of the Bible. I'm not a classical.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second, Skyout. To anybody that's listening to this room, did I ever say that he is making a mistake by having to rely on his memory for reading the Bible? Yeah. Anybody else at all? Does anybody agree with Skyout? Because right now, what you are doing right now is that you are trying to counter a point that I did not make. I did not make that.
On the last debate, you talked about memory and the reliability of the text.
What you said on this debate was that, let me see if I can remember correctly, that you were using an example of a properly basic belief and how it works, like in order to rebut whether or not your memory is reliable, you would have to use your memory. And whether or not to prove that your memory is reliable, you have to use your memory. And you were using that as an example. That's the only time I've seen you reference memory in this current discussion.
But he's talking about.
And I also use it how to to assume the opposite of your memory being reliable. So to assume that your memory is not reliable, it would still also rely on your memory. This is what they would call the infallible justification of a properly basic belief.
Well,
Okay.
I would say that your set of beliefs on your coherence theory of justification is based on some
Now
bad
now you're shifting it to me. We're
Because
talking
that's
about
how
whether
you
or not
that's how you look at it, dude.
we're talking about
That's
your
how you
worldview
look
right
at it.
now.
It's an error. You're looking at an
My
error.
worldview has not come up yet. We have not
But,
even
dude,
we have not
seriously?
even scratched the surface of mine. Okay, at this point in time, all we are doing this entire discussion right now, up to this point, is analyzing whether or not, under your worldview, God can exist as a properly basic belief. This requires this is a discussion that you could be having with yourself if you were smarter.
I told you over and over that the belief in God is properly basic because it fits the requirement for proper basicality and a criterion, which is a rule.
Okay, fine. Okay,
done,
right there.
Done.
Fine. Proper basicality. Can you tell me what proper basicality is for a properly basic belief?
A proper basicality is distinguishing something that's properly basic and what is not, what is rational, reasonable, and direct and obvious, that has epistemic warrant. You're basically saying that
right there.
Yeah.
Stop right there. Okay. You think that it's rational, okay? You think that it's rational that to believe in God. Okay? Lots of people do. There's a lot of people in the world that believe it's rational to believe in Allah. There's a lot of people that believe it's rational to believe in other religions out there.
Really?
Okay? There's a lot of people that will use exactly the same argument to describe what they believe is rational. But then you go on and you also say that it also has this epistemic warrant. But I've given you the examples of what it requires for epistemic warrant, but you have not actually made an argument for why your belief has any type of epistemic warrant. Okay, does anybody in this room think that he has answered my question about how God has epistemic warrant?
No, and I've actually been sitting back and waiting for that because he's upset and you've bemoaned. Hold on for a second. I've sat and I've listened, and you're upset that Socka has compared God to the Great Pumpkin, voodoo magic, but you've not actually shown the demarcation outside of you simply declaring it so, right? And I've heard Socka ask you at least 4 times where that demarcation is, because I can declare the remote on my desk to be properly based. I can declare it to be anything. But okay, well, cool. So what actually makes it properly basic? I've not even heard you lay out what defines something as properly basic outside of a few criteria when you're talking about proper basicality, right? That's you've laid that out, but you've not actually attached that to the God belief, because when Socka was asking you to parse that out, you could not do it other than to reference stuff in coherentism, which again I need to stop and ask you, is this an internal or an external critique being conducted, Skyout?
Dude, I just told you, like, I'm not going to even answer that question.
Okay, it's clear that you don't. It's actually very pertinent because you keep trying to attack coherentism.
Yeah, because it's a set of beliefs that don't cohere to reality.
Okay, that's
a belief.
Yeah. So one of you is doing an internal critique and the other's doing an external critique. You do realize that, right?
Okay.
Okay, never mind. You don't see why that's even... All right, go ahead.
No, I understand what you're saying, but what I
Wait. Do you know what that means?
Okay, internal critique, external critique.
Yes. Do you know what that means?
One inside, one outside.
Right,
critique,
but do you know what that means?
Yeah, I just said it. I mean,
one inside, one outside. What does it mean?
Let me explain, dude. Let me explain. Okay, first of all, you can't.
Okay, Scott, you're gonna have to calm down a little bit here, okay?
It's okay. I interrupted him. That's my fault. Go ahead. No, it's I interrupted you. That's my fault. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, how do I know it's the God of Christianity? Because it's something.
No. Internal and external critiques.
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I don't care. I don't care about external and internal. I'm not talking about that. I don't care.
That's relevant to the conversation. Okay, so I'm gonna Scout.
It is important because
Scout, for the sake of the people that are in this room here, okay, and I know that a few people already know this, but I'm going to explain it to the people that might not know this, including yourself. Okay, is that an internal critique means that I'm going to assume your position, okay, and I'm going to work from your position to see whether or not I can come to the same conclusion as you. So I'm going to forget everything that I think. You know, my entire epistemic framework for how it is that I can believe that I come to know things. I'm going to set that aside. And I'm going to adopt the position of Skyout, which is starting off with something with a properly basic belief that I call God. But the problem is that when I'm doing this internal critique from you, is that I don't understand why this properly basic belief of God that I'm trying to take on has any epistemic warrant over any other claim that I can put in that place. Okay. And so what I'm asking of you is that because you're in this position as well, where you're obviously this is your viewpoint, is
so do you
that
think that Spider-Man
I've
is
laid out.
properly basic? Really, dude? You think Spider-Man, Thor,
No, I
Thanos,
don't. Okay, hold on a second. Hold on.
Why
So
the hell are you accusing me of it?
before you strawman me, I don't think any of those things are properly basic any more than I believe that your belief in God is properly basic.
But you don't have
Before all the reasons that I've laid out. See, I could mean the reason why I use the very ludicrous examples
bad epistemic
is I do well. I believe because listen, this is an internal critique that I'm doing right now, and if you think that
you're doing a garbage job
if you think that my internal critique of
is
your
garbage.
viewpoint is garbage, well, that's just a reflection of your viewpoint, because that's all I'm doing is critiquing
No,
your
that's
viewpoint.
A reflection of your set of beliefs that cohere to reality.
Well, it's not, because we're not talking about any of that stuff at all.
Yeah, you don't want to talk about it.
Skyot,
Yeah,
listen.
You don't want to talk about it.
Well, because right now we're just talking about yours.
I'll talk about it for you.
So hold on a second, Skyout.
All right, so hold on for a second. So this is just turned into a shit. So I think we're at about 30 minutes in, right? Just so y'all know, and it's just getting to the point where Socka is trying to cordially, casually explain something, and then you're just sort of interjecting and jumping in with just kind of noises, Skyout, when something's being explained to you. You are, and I'm literally sitting here recording it. I'm watching the audio jump into the red every time you do that, right? I'm literally looking at it. So if there's something that you just, again, so you're still doing, I'm recording this. If there's something that's not being understood, there's no shame in that, right? Fine. Swallow your pride, say, explain it. Because it's clear to literally almost everyone in here that understands what's going on that you don't actually get what Sokka's point is, nor do you actually understand the internal critique that's being done, because you keep attacking coherentism, right? That's a key. That was a key. Well, the fact that you don't. Okay. Skyout.
Are we still doing just a tip?
So it's been 30 minutes. So Sokka, have you?
Let me get.
Sokka, go ahead and finish. After Sokka's done, you know what? Balls to the wall. Go for it.
All right. So this conversation was done like pretty much.
Yeah,
right
I
at the
won.
beginning.
Yeah, you're right. You're coherent garbage.
The issue that we have here is that what Skyout wants to do is he wants to assert God as a properly basic belief. Okay, which is fine. Other philosophers have tried and failed to do the same thing that he has, and they haven't gotten that far with this at all. Now the idea is that
coherent set of beliefs.
Okay, Skyout, you're being childish now. Okay, all right. The issue that Skyout has here is that he hasn't actually provided why God has epistemic warrant. Okay. He hasn't provided that at all. He's asserted a few things about it, but the things about that he's asserted can also be said about any made-up concept that I can kind of throw out there. But the biggest problem that he has is that those things alone do not provide epistemic warrant. Now he might think that this is a cool little picture that he's putting out there. It's like, well, it's rational to do that. Okay, great, but that doesn't mean that it has epistemic warrant. So he tries to do that. Yeah, I am serious, okay? You could assert all these other things, but the biggest problem that he's going to run into here, regardless of how he wants to describe God as a properly basic belief, is that in order to separate this non-inferential belief he has from any ridiculous claim that I could make up, is it has to have that epistemic warrant that he talks about, that he asserts. Now, I was nice to him in the sense that I provided him exactly the means in which one would go about to show that there's epistemic warrant through infallible justification of a non-inferential belief. Okay, and I laid it out several times, and I gave him the example of memory, where you can go and you can use this non-inferential justification. And all I've asked of Skyout, from even before we got into this hangout, was how does he have that type of justification for the belief in God? And we've waited for 25 minutes, and he has not been able to even come close to explaining how God as a properly basic belief comes into the same category as memory, the existence of an external reality, the existence of other minds, the reliability of induction, of the deduction, any of these things. He has actually not been able to provide anything close to how those things would fall into the same category. Now, the difference between Skyout's position and a foundationalist is that if they were asked to provide a type of a justification for a non-inferential belief, okay, that didn't just rely on some type of circularity, well, they could do that, but he hasn't been able to do that at all.
No,
And so at this point in time,
you don't recognize it.
Okay, listen, I could reckon, like, I'm not even a foundationalist, but when a foundationalist makes an argument with other property-based beliefs, I could recognize what they're talking about. Okay, so the ability to recognize it is because I already have that recipe for what they think is that non-inferential justification is. Well, he hasn't done that. Okay, so I just want Skyout to maybe one last time, because I'm not going to say anything after this unless he actually provides a substantial answer for this, is what is the non-inferential justification, okay, for the belief of God being properly basic that can be shown as like an infallible justification, like the examples I gave for memory?
Okay. I was going to say that, let's say faith in Jesus Christ, for example, requires, I was going to say God, the existence of God is axiomatic, it's foundational, but then the faith in God requires properly basic beliefs such as justification for belief in Jesus Christ. So it wouldn't make any sense if I said, oh, the belief in Jesus Christ is true because my cat told me. That wouldn't be properly basic. So you need epistemic warrant. You got to use epistemic judgment. And what you're doing is you're using very bad epistemic judgments and bad epistemic quality. Because you got to look for something that has proper basicality and was a criterion for the belief in Jesus Christ. So if I said I believe in Jesus Christ because of Thanos or Thor or Wolverine, then maybe you would have a point. But I'm saying the existence of God is axiomatic, non-inferential, just like our sensory apprehensions and other minds in the external world. The existence of God is axiomatic, but faith in God requires the right criterion for justification, which is your confusion on your coherentism and your sets of beliefs. So I will attack coherentism because it's a trash can of worldview, because you have to add and subtract.
All right. Okay.
Recording's off. All right.
Does anybody